Warning: this video will contain spoilers for Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 2, as well as some specific moments from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. If you haven't watched these, and still intend to do so, then why haven't you done so already? You had more than a decade of time, and even if you are just now getting to it, why are you bothering to watch a video covering the second season of GX? Anyways, there will be large spoilers for GX, and I'll provide timestamps for spoilers for those two other shows. And now, let's get to the review. Once more, we return to the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. If you haven't watched my video on Season 1, you best do so now, and if you did, and just need a quick reminder, here you go. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX was a follow-up to the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. It stood out by taking place on an island with an academy where its students were supposed to learn how to become better at playing the Duel Monsters card game. The execution left a bit to be desired, as Season 1 seemed split into two halves, where the first one was quite down-to-earth, with a bit too much filler, while the second one tried to replicate elements from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, as if getting desperate to keep the attention of the shrinking audience. But that's all in the past now. We're in the second season, which is why I went from the Slifer red jacket to this fancy Ra yellow one. And as for the background and why I'm not on Duel Academy Island anymore, well, that's quite an interesting story. Originally, there was an idea for a movie titled Yu-Gi-Oh! Vs. GX, a story about a creepy fortune teller called Sartorius who wished to beat Yugi and thus asked Kaiba to lend some of his equipment to him. Jaden and the GX gang would end up drawn into the conflict as they went on a school trip to Domino City. The title implies some conflict, but it's pretty clear that in the end, Yugi and Jaden were supposed to team up and beat Sartorius. This movie idea ended up being scrapped, but there was a desire to salvage it and make a whole season based on the story. So let's see how a plot meant for a movie will do as one for a whole season. We start by introducing the primary antagonists? That's right, they don't appear halfway through the season, instead we see a bit of them right away in the first episode. Aster Phoenix, a world-class duelist, signs up to Duel Academy and makes Jaden his rival. After finding out who he is, everyone is confused as to why someone of his skill level would be at this school. However, as it turns out, his manager Sartorius wants him to test Jaden. Jaden does win their first game, but Aster wasn't using his actual deck, so we know that an actual duel is still ahead of us. Admittedly, much like the thing with Chaz in Season 1, the episode where the true duel takes place isn't far away, but the gang does feel differently about Aster then. Plus, he does end up using his true Destiny Hero deck, which does make a rematch feel more meaningful, but I suppose nothing can top the fact that Jaden does actually lose! And due to a curse put on Aster's cards, he does lose his ability to see Duel Monster spirits and his cards, leading him to running away from the island on a boat. And around the same time, Sartorius beats Chaz in a game which brainwashes him into becoming a member of the Society of Light, a cult that Sartorius is the head of. Wow! Props to the writing team for managing to set something up. Within less than 10 episodes, we met our bad guys, we understood that they were a threat, and we see that the stakes are pretty high. This is a promising start. But sadly, what follows is quite a step down. Jaden gets hit by a meteor, wakes up on another planet where an anthropomorphic dolphin that had his ass sewn shut by 4Kids tells him that his destiny is to defeat the Light of Destruction, which stands behind the Society of Light. Then, a robot servant of the Society of Light appears and wants to duel against Jaden. Our hero finds a deck on the beach with cards that he drew as a kid for a contest. Unbeknownst to him, his cards won, were printed and sent into space. Remembering why he loved duel monsters in the first place, he regains his abilities and wins the game, after which he wakes up on the shore of the island and starts his journey back to the academy to fight the Light of Destruction. And a bit time after, he does beat Aster in a rematch, who begins to question his loyalty to Sartorius, which closes this chapter of the story. Well, gee, this isn't quite what I expected. I understand if this confuses some of you, so I'll do my best to explain what just happened. Jaden needed to get a shiny new deck for this season, so the writers made him lose and came up with the most logical explanation for everything. Aliens! I don't get it. Our villain's theme is all about tarot cards and destiny. There isn't any alien connection to be seen, unless one were to insist that his deck contains alien robots. I'm pretty sure this was just shoehorned in so Jaden's new alien monsters had some sort of weak ties to the villains. Even the robot that Jaden duels is incredibly forced in its inclusion. We never saw this kind of robot before, nor will we see it again after this episode. It all feels so random and thoughtless in its execution. Oh well, guess now that our protagonist has his groove back and knows who his enemies are, we can start the season proper. So let me start by pointing out a glaring problem. Filler episodes. In episode 70, Chaz enters the Obelisk Blue Dorm and possesses everyone there, which is stupid because we know that said dorm is split into the female and male houses, and yet it's treated as if all students have become converted right here and there. But more importantly, he was possessed in episode 61! All along, he could have progressed the plans of Master Sartorius, but didn't because in all of his appearances in between, he did say one or two sentences which made it clear that he is possessed, but then he'd talk and act like normal. Tons of episodes are just there to waste time. Quite a downgrade from the first season. And I know that some people might insist that season 1 had plenty of filler episodes as well. It is, after all, something that I complained about myself. But I think there is an important distinction to be made. As much as I hated the Shadow Riders for popping out of nowhere, their late inclusion did allow for things to remain fairly low stakes in the first half of season 1. Time was wisely spent introducing the settings and characters to the audience. Certain episodes which didn't truly progress the plot did still lay bricks for the future, giving them a feeling of at least some importance. And because of that, the small story arcs could feel meaningful without the world being in danger at the moment. Later, once the writers showed up, the filler stuff was kept to a minimum, and even then, you didn't feel like the characters forgot about the threat at hand. However, with Aster and his manager stepping in this early, and the brainwashing going on, all these other stories feel really unimportant. Although in all fairness, even taking this issue aside, they are far less compelling than what we had seen previously. For example, Chumley was replaced by this new character called Hassleberry. He and Cyrus will have fights over who's Jaden's best friend. How riveting. Then we have Zane losing to Aster, becoming sad, and then turning into a bad boy. How edgy. And lastly, there's Crowler becoming the new Chancellor, getting a French stereotype assistant and trying to tear down the Slifer Red Dorm. Slifer House! Of course, aside from these, we also get a few stories with one-off characters, and even a goddamn clip show episode. Once we remove all these dumb episodes, we're left with ones focused on the Society of Light. But I still find these quite lacking. They're most of them about Jaden dueling against someone from the Society of Light with some dumb gimmick deck, which, you know, Jaden beat Aster, a true champion, so why would any of these losers pose any threat? There's also a few episodes where the Society of Light tries to possess some of Jaden's friends, and those may later get follow-ups where Jaden tries to restore their former self. You can argue that these episodes have bigger stakes, but I beg to differ. Does the Society of Light gain any advantage by getting these characters on their side? Are the heroes at a disadvantage because they lost someone when Jaden is doing all of the winning anyway? If in the end, it's just about defeating Sartorius, then I proclaim that these position and unposition episodes do not matter either. Honestly, this whole Society of Light cult reminds me of some other story arcs in other Yu-Gi-Oh! Shows. Mild spoiler warning ahead. Skip to this point if you wish to avoid this sort of stuff. No matter if we're talking about the Waking the Dragons arc from the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the Dark Signers arc from Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, both contain elements visible in the Society of Light arc from GX, but they are far superior to it for numerous reasons. Despite the main character always being the one who beats the bad guy in the end, the arcs feature a wider array of characters both on the side of the protagonist and antagonist. Often, the heroes end up fighting against people who share a similar history, personality, or motivation with them. Sometimes it may even be characters that they knew personally joining the dark side. And while there certainly is an element of manipulation or mind control, we always see some personal motivation behind the character's actions, which makes everything so much more understandable and compelling. These are some of my favorite parts of this entire franchise, but here we have GX making a big detour around all of the things that could make this interesting. Jaden is the only one who can do anything, and he's basically an empty slate, while all his enemies are just brainwashed with, at best, a promise of becoming better duelists as motivation, which isn't exactly deep. But enough of that. Let's focus on the episodes that have a tiny bit more going for them, which means going to Domino City! Finally! I was beginning to forget why I chose this background in the first place. Well, we're here, and I can tell that there was a lot of rewrites in the script. For example, the crossover is very limited. We mostly get Yugi's grandpa walking around with Jaden and the others, while Sartorius briefly meets Seto Kaiba. Yugi is not present at all for all of this. Next is the fact that Sartorius' sister Sarina and her henchmen, who are supposed to deal with Jaden and his friends, as instructed by Sartorius, don't seem brainwashed, so I assume that the Society of Light did not use mind control in the old draft of the script. Then there's the big tag duel happening in virtual reality, which is played by Sarina versus Jaden and Aster, as he is no longer working with Sartorius. And I am certain that Sartorius was meant to be the enemy here, perhaps when Aster used to be Yugi in the movie pitch, but since he's meant to be the final boss of this season, he's replaced with Sarina number 2. You know, cause it's virtual reality and she can be there twice? What a truly inspired choice. Also, the whole reason for the virtual reality duel was meant to reveal who the destined duelist is, Jaden or Aster, with the final answer being, I don't know, one of the two I guess. Which not only makes this whole multi-part story feel rather pointless, but also couldn't possibly be the plan of the main villain of a movie. I hope so, at least. Actually, to continue a bit further with the rewrites, when the gang returns to the academy, the Chancellor is back and announces the GX tournament. One of the participants is Prince Ojin, who I feel is very similar to Aster. A princely noble figure wearing white that Sartorius needs for his plans. This is just my theory, but I think that originally Aster and the prince were the same character. Sartorius might have originally befriended Prince Aster, wanting to use him for his plans, but then things got shuffled around and we got two characters instead. A prince with actual power, and the son of a card designer who became a prince-like champion duelist. Oh yeah, speaking of that, Aster's dad designed a card that got infused with the light, after which he vanished. Or got killed if you are watching the Japanese original. After this, a guy called D became Aster's legal guardian, but it turns out that he was the one who kidnapped / killed his dad, and took said evil card. And I'm once again putting my tinfoil hat on, and I say that D was originally supposed to be Sartorius. But because Jaden should be the one to beat the main bad guy, Aster couldn't win. However, at the same time, Aster ending the season with someone else avenging his father, well, that would feel very unsatisfying for his character. And that is why, in episode 97, out of nowhere, we get introduced to D, the world champion that wasn't mentioned before. Then we find out that he shared the card slide with Sartorius, which made him the way he is now. A true middleman of evil. After which, at the end of episode 98, he gets beaten by Aster, never to be heard from again. Now Aster can go and get his ass kicked, so Jaden can shine. Anyway, let's focus on the main resolution of the entire plot. The main evil plan of the Society of Light is to brainwash the whole planet. Or, well, destroy it in the Japanese original. How are these evil masterminds going to do this? Well, in episode 84, when the GX tournament starts, Prince Ojin attends it and loses to Sartorius, becomes possessed, and hands over the control keys to a space satellite which has the means to destroy / hypnotize all of the world. So that we're on the same page here, a prince from a kingdom with a dangerous weapon decides to join a card game tournament while carrying the controls to said weapon in question, and using it as a bet in a card game to get some rare cards. This was Sartorius' plan. Look, I know that Sartorius' thing is fate and how he believes his victory to be destined, so things just happen in his favor, landing in his hands, so it makes sense thematically, but this is so lame and unsatisfying. At this point, you might as well say that he uses a magical conch shell. Oh yeah, speaking of that, can you guess what Sartorius does after he obtains the keys?
Oh, magic conch shell. What do we need to do now that we have the keys to the satellite?
Nothing.
The shell has spoken!
Nothing. We can't just sit here and do nothing.
There is a span of 8 episodes where the villain is just twiddling his thumbs instead of completing his master plan. Eventually, the real Sartorius awakens and as a spirit gives the keys to Jaden and Aster. Because he can do that now, apparently. Which means that the evil Sartorius needs to win both of them back. Which he will not do personally, because we need to kill more time with more episodes. At least until our shiny duelist prince arrives for a game. As I mentioned before, Aster loses and the final duel between Jaden and Sartorius begins. Which may be a 3-part episode, but there's nothing to it. It's a boring game with the attention constantly shifting to Chaz, who during all of this still participates in the GX tournament, and Hassleberry, who tries to stop the satellite from launching, which involves him transforming into a dinosaur in space. Things mercifully end, Sartorius and all the students are freed from the light of destruction, and with that, Season 2 concludes. I have to make a confession. Back in the day, Season 2 was my favorite. And that's not because I thought it was good, it's because I thought it was so bad that even die-hard GX fans had a hard time arguing with me about it. It was most satisfying to see something that justified my negative sentiment towards the show. However, given how now I've become much more forgiving towards it, Season 2 feels like a major letdown. There's many shows that had an awkward first season and only ended up discovering their true strong points a bit later. This is even arguably true for the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series. Not Season 0, mind you. So it feels like a major shame to follow up the flawed Season 1 with something where so many things are done in an even worse way than there. Less multi-part episodes, much more filler, and all under conditions that make it even harder to sit through, with the spotlight being even more focused on our protagonist. It is possible that certain changes could have helped, like fixing some dumb retcons, clearing up certain inconsistencies related to the Society of Light, and making things feel much more satisfying and earned. But perhaps the concept of stretching a movie's plot into a whole season was flawed from the start and shouldn't have been considered in the first place. Who knows what plot the writers would have come up with if they started from scratch. Perhaps it'd be something new, or maybe Zane's story could have been uplifted from a weird side plot to something that even I would have found compelling. In the end, it is what it is. Season 2 was a mess, but the story still continues in Season 3. What future will await us there? Will it be the tragic end of the show as it gets even worse? Will it get its old groove back? Or will it become better than it has ever been? Naturally, I'll talk about it when the time comes. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see each other again whenever that video is complete. Until then.